For decades, gardeners have been told the same tired message. Fix your soil with compost, add fertilizer, till it in, and hope for the best. But anyone who has worked long enough with the land knows that soil doesn't change because of additives alone. Soil changes when its biology changes. The first minute of this story cuts straight through the noise, because the truth comes from a grain so old that its origins reach back before recorded agriculture, a grain used long before soil labs, NPK charts, or synthetic amendments. This ancient grain didn't just feed civilizations, it transformed the soil beneath their feet. And when you apply it the way early farmers did, the results challenge nearly every modern claim about what soil really needs to thrive. The grain is millet, small, overlooked, and capable of quietly rebuilding the foundation of soil life in a way few modern crops can match. Millet's strength comes from the way it interacts with soil microbes and structure. Unlike heavy-feeding modern grains, millet evolved in poor, low-nutrient soils where water was scarce and organic matter was thin. This forced it to develop an unusually dense and finely branched root network, one that can penetrate compacted soil without mechanical tilling. Those roots exude sugars, starches, and organic acids that act as signaling compounds for bacteria and fungi. Unlike crops that demand resources up front, millet coaxes the biology to awaken. Within just a few weeks of growth, beds that were stubborn and unresponsive begin showing signs of renewed aeration and crumb structure. The roots push channels through hardened layers, which remain long after the plant finishes its life cycle. Early farmers relied on millet for exactly this reason. It prepared the ground for the next crop without the need for tools. The real surprise came when studying the nutrient retention patterns around millet root zones. Millet releases fewer nitrogen-hungry fibers when decomposing, meaning it does not trigger the nitrogen drawdown that cardboard, straw, or wood-based mulches often cause. Instead, its residue offers a balanced carbon-to-nitrogen ratio that encourages steady microbial activity even in cold conditions. The decaying roots feed soil organisms gradually, creating a slow-release nutrient profile. When left to break down in place, millet stubble behaves almost like a natural fertilizer injector. Nutrients do not flush away after rain because the root channels trap water and hold organic matter deep in the soil profile. In beds that typically lose fertility during heavy rains, millet established a baseline of stability that lasted months before needing additional amendments. Modern gardening advice, leans heavily toward clover vetch or rye as cover crops. While these certainly work, they do come with limitations most guides tend to gloss over. Rye, for example, can create allelopathic compounds. Clover is, a bit slow to establish in cold weather. And vetch, it attracts pests in certain climates. Millet, on the other hand, grows rapidly in poor soil and heat, places where conventional cover crops just stall or fail entirely. It tolerates drought better than any small grain, really. Its biomass breaks down cleanly without leaving a tough thatch layer that slows spring planting. And because millet's roots dig deep, it actually improves subsoil layers that compost or mulch never reach. You know, farmers in parts of Africa and Asia have used millet as a rehabilitation crop for exhausted fields, and honestly, this proves that its benefits stretch far beyond just its grain. These days, modern soil health advisors rarely mention millet because, well, it doesn't fit the fertilizer-centered model they tend to promote. But the evidence is really quite indisputable. Millet builds soil naturally. The practical application requires no special tools and really no additional inputs. You simply start by loosening just the top 2 centimeters of soil to allow for good seed-to-soil contact. Then scatter millet seeds densely across the bed, much like early farmers broadcasted grains rather than planting them in tight rows. Just water once to activate germination, and honestly, millet does the rest. Within 10 to 14 days, a living sheet of green emerges, covering the soil and shading out weeds. The root system immediately begins carving through compacted sections, restoring airflow and moisture pathways. If the goal is soil repair, allow the millet to grow 40 to 50 centimeters tall, then cut it at the base. Leave the roots in place. The channels they created will act as a natural sponge, absorbing water during rain events and releasing it slowly during dry spells. Lay the cut biomass directly on the bed to act as a soft, nutrient-rich mulch. Unlike straw, which can mat and repel water, millet mulch decomposes evenly and rapidly, feeding the microbiology directly below it. You know, the most striking results really do appear in the 2nd and 3rd seasons after millet treatment. Beds that once crusted after watering develop a loose, granular texture, which is quite a transformation. Earthworm activity increases noticeably because the millet stubble feeds them without overwhelming them with tough carbon fibres. Heavy clay beds become easier to work with, not because they were amended, but because the biological activity increased naturally. And sandy beds hold moisture longer because organic matter is anchored deeper in the soil profile. Millet essentially rewrites the bed's water and nutrient dynamics. Even crops sensitive to heat stress benefit because millet-treated soil holds a cooler microclimate below the surface. So these long-term gains, you see, really explain why millet managed to maintain agricultural stability across those harsh climates where wheat or barley, well, they failed repeatedly. Part of the reason millet disappeared from Western soil advice is, well, actually quite simple. It just cannot be monetized the way fertilizers can. A grain that builds soil without additives doesn't really fit the business model of product-driven agriculture. Soil textbooks followed suit, focusing on crops that align with fertilizer schedules rather than those that, bypass them altogether. Yet archaeological studies consistently show millet fields recovering faster after drought, overgrazing or nutrient depletion. The proof existed long before modern soil science began, but it was unfortunately overshadowed by commercial agriculture's priorities. Millet won't just grow food. Its roots can rebuild the ground you depend on. If you found this guide useful and want more historical, practical soil wisdom tested in real beds, Do subscribe to Hydro Haven and share this video. Every gardener deserves the truth about what really restores soil health.